Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Government and Audit Scrutiny Committee. Shall I start again? Good evening, and my apologies for that. Welcome to everyone, and very nice to see you all in person after such a long time. I'm Councillor Richard Van Dolken, and I'll be chairing this meeting. Members, can I remind you that this meeting is being broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel. Before I begin the main meeting, a few general points to make. It's our first in-person meeting since early 2020, and while the committee is meeting in person, we have some officers who will still be accessing the meeting virtually. As we move through the meeting, can I please remind everyone present to turn off their microphones when you've finished talking. Members, please also be reminded that there is a confidential appendix to Agenda Number 5, Manor Street Audit Progress Report. As members will be aware, generally the Council seeks to operate in an open and transparent way with as much information as possible in the public domain. From time to time, for a number of reasons, it's important that key elements of information are kept confidential. It's often the case that members can debate the substantive issues surrounding the proposals without the need to specifically refer to the confidential elements. Given this, I would usually intend to keep the debate open and public. However, if any member feels it's necessary to raise specific points on the confidential elements, we'll need to move into private session. This will, if required, mean stopping the broadcast of the meeting via the Council's YouTube channel and asking for any members of the public in attendance to leave the chamber. If any member intends to raise elements in the debate about the private information, then I'd appreciate your indication now so as to ease the administration of the meeting. Do any members intend to raise matters during the item?
I think I will, Chairman. Request that we take it in private session because we may stray over the border of protocol, and I think we could talk about it more freely in private session. We can note that part of the agenda which is not confidential at item 5 in any event. So I propose we do that, but take the body of the discussion in private session.
Well, I can confirm that members have indicated they wish to raise matters set out in the confidential appendix to this report. Consequently, I will temporarily move the meeting into private session while agenda item 5 is being discussed, on the basis that members will refer to confidential information exempt from disclosure under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended.
Chairman, we'll move into private session when you reach item 5. So if you could proceed to deal with apologies for absence and declarations of interest whilst we're in private public session.
I see. Okay. Apologies. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies, as I understand, have been received from Councillor Walsh and Councillor Hume. Any others? No? And Councillor Santamaro is not here at the moment. I'll proceed to item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest they wish to declare this evening? If so, please state the item and the nature of your interest. When I was reading through the agenda, I noticed this, and this is rather different from some other meetings. I just thought it'd be useful just to read this out. Aside from declaring matters of interest, of pecuniary interest, etc., it says as well to declare the interest and nature of any instruction given by or on behalf of a political group to any councillor who's a member of that group as to how that councillor shall speak or vote on any matter before the committee. Just thought I'd mention that. Okay? Not that I'm sure anybody...
It's useful to have a group chair.
I'm sure none of us would ever do that, but... To agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meetings. Can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as accurate records of the meetings of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee? Well, it was then known as the Corporate Governance Group, on the 3rd of March 2021, which was to do with the constitutional review. Do I have a... Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So Councillor Euston and Councillor Mann. Then we have the 1st of April 2021, and this was also to do with the parts of the Constitution, and it was financial procedure rules, procurement procedure rules. Can I have your approval? Again, Councillor Euston, Councillor Mann. Thank you very much. They've been moved and seconded as an accurate record, and all in favour please indicate. Thank you very much. I will sign the last page. Thank you. Agenda item 4, public question time. I confirm, or I understand, there are no registered speakers for this evening's meeting. So we can now proceed with agenda item 5, Manor Street Audit Progress Report in private session.
Thank you, Chairman. If we could just pause whilst we move, we shut down the YouTube feed and move into private session. We're just waiting for confirmation, Chairman. No, that's fine. Okay. Are we muted on YouTube?
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. Chairman, over to you for item 6, key financial indicators.
Thank you, members. We now resume the rest of this meeting in public session. Thank you to those who watched the webcast for their patience while we were in private session. We'll now proceed with agenda item 6, key financial indicators. Members, this report for this item is set out on pages 15 to 24 of the agenda. Please can I invite Trevor Wilson, Head of Finance, to set out the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, this report looks at the key financial indicators of the authority up till the 31st of May, so just the first 2 months of the new financial year. The appendices gives details of the levels of spend in our major areas, revenue and capital, some indications on council tax and business rates, how the collections are going on that, our debtors situation and our treasury situation. Main points, if I may, Chair, just to bring out, in terms of the overall general fund, our revenue account, the net position, which is gross expenditure less a substantial amount of income, nets down to just under 15.5 million that we're expecting to spend during the year. The anticipated position as at the 31st of May resulted in a small negative variance, so slightly overspent. And that's the net effect of the continuing COVID situation. As you see at point 3.2, make comments about we are doing estimates for government in terms of the impact on the authority's income and expenditure. So as at the end of May, we're doing it on a monthly basis. In fact, there's one due very shortly, the latest one. But at this time, looking back at the figures for May, then we were anticipating, or there was additional expenditure of 173,000 and additional reduction in income of 126,000. So that's obviously the best part of 300,000, and I said initially that there was a small negative variance. So there's some positive situation working in our favour, that there are some underspends or additional income being achieved by service areas which are not directly COVID related. So that accounts for the net position. If we project forward in terms of where we think the additional expenditure and reduced income is concerned, we think that will be about 1.7 million for the year, but obviously that changes on a monthly basis in terms of how the recovery is going out with businesses and our communities. But in terms of support, we continue to have support from government. We've been allocated 686,000 of emergency funding for the current year. We've had an allocation of contain outbreak funding from government, 177,000. And the government has promised that the compensation scheme for losses of certain types of income, fees and charges, that was in place for last financial year will continue for the first 3 months of this new financial year. So obviously in the next month or so we will be making an application for the loss that we're still suffering on it, car park and fees as an example, and that. So it's still a very live situation for us. We're still suffering from the impacts and that, but as I say, we've had positive support from the government in terms of those figures. As I say, it's the early part of the year. The accountants, Phil and the team, are looking at the position as at the end of the first quarter, which is always a good position as we start to then think about budget setting for preliminary work for the budget setting for the next financial year. So that will be reported to Cabinet in due course, but obviously by the end of this month, July, we'd expect that position to be known. Just picking out the big areas, salaries is by far the largest sort of area of spend, and that a lot of staff providing the services. So just under 20 million is the budget for the year. But there is a positive variance on that. So where I said there was some variances which are positive for the authority, which are not COVID related, then this is one of the main ones that contributes to that situation. And that's primarily about vacancies and difficulties filling posts and changes in people's hours, so reductions in their work and in their contracts. Positive comment about the rental income. We've got quite a large portfolio of commercial and industrial properties, so we're looking to get approximately £3 million of income, some 218 leases that constitute that. We do make a small provision for voids. There will be movement in that during the course of the year, but I'd say historically that's only been small, so that's 52,000 out of, say, nearly 3 million. And a positive situation that all properties as at the 31st of May are being occupied and that, so really pleased with how that's been. Expenditure on capital projects, a substantial capital project programme for this year, just under 38 million. Relatively small level of spend at this current time, or as existed at the end of May, just 2.2 million. But the major projects, well, one is what we've just been discussing, Manor Street, and that the budget for this year as we look to conclude the project is 13 million. We've got the Enterprise Centre at Horizon 120, and we've got the other development works, the ongoing development works of arranging for the sites to be serviced and then sold on. So, and I Construct and the pedestrianisation of Braintree project, and that's so quite substantial projects there in place, and that will impact on the monies when we look at the Treasury situation. Moving, if I may, to council tax, the actual amount that the authority is collecting, the debit that we've set and on behalf of ourselves and Essex County Council and the other preceptors has now topped 100 million. 101.65 is what we're looking to achieve. At the end of May, 20.56% collection rate. That's up on last year, 20.2. But obviously that was COVID impacted. If we look back at 2019 as at May, then it was 21.32. So we are still down a percentage point on that. The previous year to that was 21.5. So in terms of business rates, just under 30 million is what we're looking to collect. 19.41% collected. That's substantially up on what we collected in the previous year, 16.61, and is a lot closer to where we were in 2019, which was 20.5%. I think the main thing to draw to your attention is that there's still a substantial amount of retail relief given to businesses, and that the government has made that clear that needed to continue for the current year. So the total value, as we initially assessed, was 16.25 million. That's fully based on 100% relief, continuing as it had for the last financial year. But the government has said that that will only exist for the first 3 months of this year. So we have just sent out there's revised bills gone out to businesses from the 1st of July, reducing that discount down to 66%. So they are still getting a substantial, but they are presented with bills now. So obviously a thing to watch in terms of how businesses perform and that. So these are in the retail and leisure areas that are getting that relief. So as I say, it was 16 million. Once we bring in the reduction and that for the remainder of the year, that will obviously reduce, and obviously the amount collectible will increase. At this stage, in terms of write-offs, there's very little in terms of council tax and business rates. A comment about the debtors, 3.12 million. Still a substantial proportion of that, over half, is in respect of housing benefit overpayments. But as previously explained to the committee, and that is reliant on payment plans which are dictated by government in terms of the amount that we can require people to repay, and effectively that means that the debt will be outstanding for quite a considerable time. Moving to investments, very low rates of interest getting on the short-term investments that we have, and primarily with the debt management office, so barely above zero, to be honest, and for 30 odd million that we're investing, but obviously security of the funds is the main issue that we must pay attention to there, and that. So where we are able to put monies in longer term, you'll be aware for a number of years now we've had monies in pooled funds, 19 million. Very little in the way of dividend declared and received at this early stage of the year, but we are expecting that to provide additional funds to help support the frontline services. And in terms of valuation of those pooled funds, so a snapshot at the 31st of May, the 19 million was valued at just under 21 million. So there has been an appreciation in that. So, but as we've reported to you previously, and that obviously does fluctuate, and obviously early part of last year they had declined quite a bit, but we are positive now. So those are the main highlights I wish to draw out, Chairman. Happy to take any questions, but in terms of the recommendation at 2.1, members are asked to accept the report on the key financial indicators as at 31st of May.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Members, any questions for Trevor? No. Where do, in your spreadsheet on page 19, or the key financial indicators, if indeed that would be the place, the amounts of money that we get in from the sale of land at Horizon 120, for instance, and you mentioned, or was mentioned, the sale to Eastlight. Well, that may not have quite come through yet, but where would that normally appear? In other controllable income, or?
No, it's not actually shown on here, and I think that's something that it's a good point, and that we've been concentrating on the capital programme in terms of the expenditure, and obviously you're right, there is a number of capital receipts that are being generated from a number of the capital projects, and that. So ideally, I think we need to bring to your attention the capital receipts. It's not actually shown here, so we will put it in as a separate line.
Well, it'll make us feel better.
Yeah.
It's not all just going out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Happy to pick that up as an improvement, Chair.
Okay, and I think the other thing, I was just going to commend everyone involved in all the properties occupied. I mean, that's fabulous in the middle of a pandemic. 218 leases occupied. The rents are coming in, the council tax and business rate. Okay, a lot of that may be helped by support that people are getting, but it's moving in the right direction. So let's hope that keeps up. So if there are no questions, we were asked to accept the report of the key financial indicators as at the 31st of May 2021. Can I take it that the report has been accepted? I will take silence as assent. I think this was done when we were on Zoom, but thank you very much. Thank you, members. The report has been accepted. We'll now proceed to agenda item 7, internal audit update, including progress against audit plan, which must be Angie.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so this report gives details of the progress and performance against the planned work, covering the internal audit plan for 2020-21 and the progress for the current year's plan. It also provides an update on the progress against the external quality assessment action plan and the outcome of the internal audit self-assessment against the local government application note reflecting the public sector internal audit standards. The report also provides an update on the RIPA and IPA applications made by Braintree District Council. So the progress against the 2021 Internal Audit Plan is detailed in paragraph 2 on page 27. Manor Street is at the top there. Note that the outcome detailed here is at the time of the audit fieldwork, and you'll have obviously seen how much progress has been made since the reports were produced. So the reference to the RIPA and IPA applications is in paragraph 4 on page 28. There have been no applications made in 2021 or to the date of producing this report.
Can you just, there are new members here who might not know what RIPA is. I had to ask a couple of years ago. Thank you. You just explain.
Yeah, certainly. So if we are conducting investigations and as a result of those we feel it necessary to either observe people or to make inquiries such as through social media, then we are required to get authorisation through proper channels to do that. So there's an internal authorisation route and judicial approval requirement for RIPA. So we have a detailed policy which identifies the requirements and the process for RIPA and IPA, and if it would be helpful I can forward that to you.
Thank you.
So paragraph 5 covers the progress against the external quality assessment action plan. So this was the assessment conducted in 2017-18, and the council would currently now be generally conforming to the public sector internal audit standards. So this assessment was against the council in relation to its conformance with the public sector internal audit standards, so we would now be generally conformed. Paragraph 6 reflects the self-assessment, so this is the assessment by me and my team against the public sector internal audit standards. And paragraph 5.2 on page 30 details the action plan that I feel we should consider to further meet those standards. Appendix 1 on page 32 is the progress of completion of the 2021 internal audit plan. Appendix 2 is the current year's plan, and Appendix 3 is the outcome of the audits completed since the previous report to the Governance Committee. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Angie. Members, do we have any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Angie, I think I asked this before, so I apologise for repeating daft questions, but on page 27 you list those are progress against the internal audit plan, and we have 9 significant assurances, 3 full assurances and 3 limited, so that makes a total of, I don't know, 12, 15. Do we know how this level of performance compares to other local authorities of a similar size to us? And do we think that we'll ever get to the day where we have all 15 on full assurance? Thank you.
Okay, so we haven't formally benchmarked ourselves against other authorities, but if you think the audit process, we're looking at what's important to this authority. So we'll come on to that in the audit plan report a bit further down the line. So we're considering very much the Braintree focus in in these and looking at the governance arrangements, the internal controls and risk management. So it's about us. It's not necessarily about other authorities. I don't think it would be necessarily appropriate to compare in terms of numbers of reports or numbers of recommendations or outcome. It's an ever-moving situation, isn't it? We're always looking at what we feel is most important to look at, and that's under continuous review. We'll continue to report to this committee and continually raise any concerns that we have with you and with the management team. So it's not comparable, really.
Refer to page 28, the external quality assessment action plan, which you'd mentioned, which goes back to 2017, and it's obviously been, and it says the word journey actually, but it is quite a journey that you've completed, or generally completed, 21 out of the 22, and the other one is just you just need to write a book, but. It's you have to be congratulated with everything else that you've had to do in the last 15 months. So, to you and your team, please convey that to us. So, members, if we don't have any other points or questions, let's see. This was item 7. Is that right? We're asked to note the progress and performance. Yes. Asked to note the progress and performance against the internal audit plans 2021 and 21-22. Members, can I take it that the report has been noted? Thank you very much. Members, the report has been noted. I will now proceed with agenda item 8, internal audit annual report, on pages 44 to 57, which is Angie once more.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report following the 2021 Internal Audit Work Programme, and it provides an opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and control. So the report gives background on the factors influencing that opinion. In the background, we explain that the public sector internal audit standards, it's our Bible, if you like, it's what we work to. They require that an annual report is provided to this committee, which fulfills the role of the board as defined in the standards. And that the report should include the opinion, a summary of the work supporting the opinion, and a statement on conformance with the public sector internal audit standards and the results of the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. So that's what this report is. The internal audit function must comply with the Institute of Internal Audit Code of Ethics. So there's a short explanation on that. Section 3 gives details on the role of internal audit, and there's reference in 3.2 to the audit charter, so that charter is being presented to this committee tonight as well. The standards require me to confirm that I had no constraints placed upon me and no impairments to independence and objectivity, so there's an explanation of that. Other assurance providers, so we look to other sources of information and assurance. The reference there to service leadership and management, so they inform the work, but we obviously still operate independently and still provide an independent view. Some of our work is focused on checking the effectiveness of other assurance providers, so at the bottom of page 48 there's reference to corporate oversight functions, so some of our work is looking at what they do. The overall opinion in paragraph 5 in that box is that the systems of internal control, governance and risk management are generally adequate with some improvement required. There's a little more explanation on that below. In section 6.5 gives a summary of the outcomes of all of the audits that were conducted during that year. The full assurance, substantial assurance and limited assurance work. There's just a reminder that assurance can never be absolute, so the opinion that we give is based on our assessment of the work that we need to do to be able to provide an opinion, but that work is never 100% review of all of the systems and all of the functions. We consider external sources of assurance, so those are detailed in paragraph 5.3. And note there that reference to the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency inspection report. So we've had some spot checks undertaken in that area with some very positive results. Paragraph 6.2 details staffing and issues affecting staffing and the resources available. I'd just like to draw your attention to the penultimate bullet point there. Our trainee auditor has moved very quickly to achieve certified internal auditor status and is currently studying towards the chartered internal auditor qualification, so we're very pleased with that. So audit work in respect of the 2021 plan was conducted with regard to the relative priority of audits, and they resulted in generally either a full or substantial rating. There's reference further on in the report to the implementation of agreed actions. So that is in paragraph 7.4 on page 53, and with regard to currently outstanding actions, the management board have agreed to receive regular reports on progress of implementation of agreed actions, so there's an expectation that there's assistance from management board to help drive some of those through. Paragraph 6.6 refers to previous limited assurance reports. So these were undertaken prior to the last year, and it just gives an update. Obviously, Manor Street you've heard about tonight. On contract management, the actions to improve have been agreed or in the process of being implemented, and housing application document verification. We're currently working with the service on those points. There is one reference in the report to a limited assurance report on the PCI DSS, which is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards compliance. So whilst this is limited assurance, it's reflecting the status at the point we conducted the field work, but where we are now is very different. That was resolved very, very quickly by the service. So there's reference to the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. So that involves both external quality assessments, self-assessments, and we obviously keep up to date with best practice. We check compliance with the definition of audit, the code of ethics, and generally with the public sector standards. Chairman, that's a rattle through of the main points, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Angie. Colleagues, any questions? Francie? Councillor Euston.
Again on daft questions, I'm sorry. On page 54, it says of the high priority recommendations made in 2019-2020, 5 are complete. 11 we take out of that because they're relating to Manor Street, so that leaves 5 that are not complete, and are in various stages of pending or outstanding. I'm not really sure that I understand the difference between in progress and outstanding. And further down the page, you've got high priority recommendations made in 2021. 1 is complete and 3 are pending confirmation of status. I don't know what that means either. Does that mean they're finished or about to finish, but we can't tick them off yet? And that's it. Thanks, Ange.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, if I may. So for some of these, the action date would not have elapsed, and so we would be looking to wait until the scheduled action date has passed before we check the follow-up. So for some of those, that's likely to be the case. I take your point about in progress and outstanding. I think that's relating to different stages of activity to achieve the whole, if you like. I think the key thing with this is that, as I said earlier, we are looking to report in more detail to management board so that we get some greater drive to resolve the outstanding issues that have been identified. And in some cases, circumstances change, activities might be dropped, procedures change generally. So some of the things that are identified, we still need to follow up to see where we are with them, but there will be occasions when they become superseded for one reason or another. So, but it's just getting that bigger picture.
So some of the things that are not yet completed from 2019-20, they will be completed this year, or they may not be because they'll be superseded by stuff in 2021.
So the recommendations that are made, we will follow it up. We, as Audit, we are not responsible for implementation of those recommendations, but we will raise awareness of things that are outstanding. We'll follow up to confirm that high priority recommendations have been put into action, and we'll report accordingly to the committee and to the management board. So, but I'm not in a position to say they'll be completed this year. There will be some. I think if you refer back to, as an example, the previous report, agenda item 7, in the appendix on the very last page, it referred to use and distribution of vouchers. So this was a follow-up review, but the result of that review was that the vouchers are no longer used. So that's one way of closing things down. So completing the action plan can come in different formats.
Angie, can I just ask, and perhaps this is cutting across what Councillor Euston just asked, but on 6.6, point 6.6, the 2021 work also included follow-up of previous limited assurance reports. Am I to understand that these would be, keeping it very simple, these would be reports that were finished and put to bed, however, gone back to them to try and bring them up to a higher rate of assurance?
So these are flagged up because they were limited assurance reports. So this was at the time of the audit fieldwork. The outcome of our review was that it was limited assurance. So the audit itself is closed at that point, but the action plan remains live. And for those limited assurance reports and those audits where we have high and medium priority recommendations, we schedule follow-up reviews to see where we are with them. So these are kind of kept live at the moment because at the time of writing the report, there were still outstanding issues. So that's why that's brought to your attention.
In particular. So one other question. A bit off the wall here. It mentions car leases. Who leases cars? And I mean, typically, is this officers, members, operations?
Okay, I can't see where that is at the moment,
Oh,
so
it's
my
the top of
apologies. But
page 54. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious, that's all.
okay. Yeah, so these are cars leased by council officers. So the council has a car leasing scheme, and I'm aware that the numbers of officers holding leased cars at the moment has reduced significantly over the last few years and is on a downward trend anyway.
Are these provided? Or are they paid for? Are these provided to the officers as part of the package?
The officers do make payments for the cars.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment about the trainee auditor. We've been talking this evening about experience and qualifications. Congratulations, it's very good. Nice to see somebody progressing well and like to do a lot better. It's to our benefit, of course, and obviously to his.
We are asked to accept the Internal Audit Annual Report 2020 and 2021. Members, can I take it that this report has been accepted? Thank you very much. It's now accepted, it's been noted, and we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is on page 58. And surprise, surprise, Angie.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, my apologies. I omitted to spot on the agenda, it refers to the draft internal audit plan for 2021, but this is obviously the current year, 21-22.
Okay.
My apologies for that. So the report gives an outline of the process that I follow in terms of formulating my list to present to you tonight. So that's in paragraph 1.1 on page 60. The plan builds obviously on previous year's work, is based on corporate risks and priorities. Delivery is dependent on resources and changing needs, and progress against the plan will be reported to this committee. The plan is flexible, so whilst we set a plan, because it's based on corporate risks, corporate priorities, if those change during the year, then we will review the work that we undertake. If any weaknesses are identified, if there are any areas identified during the year that we feel need to be reviewed, then we'll consider focusing our efforts in those areas instead. The ultimate aim of this work is to produce enough coverage of the Council's internal control, risk management and governance arrangements to enable me to give the opinion at the end of the year. So in the same way that I've given an opinion on the previous year's work, the plan is aimed at enabling me to do that for you. Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Angie, are you the CAE, the Chief Audit Executive?
Yes, that's correct. So that's the terminology adopted by the public sector internal audit standards. It doesn't mean I have to be called that. It reflects the job I do.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions for Angie? No. All right. So that was item 9. Yes, item 9. We are asked to endorse the internal audit plan process and draft internal audit plan for 2021-22. Can I take it, members, that you endorse this? Thank you very much. The report has been endorsed. I'll now proceed with agenda item 10, Internal Audit Charter 2021/22. This is set out on pages 71 to 83. And once more, Angie, Audit, Insurance and Fraud Manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So the public sector internal audit standards require an internal audit charter to be reviewed periodically and presented to the board, or in this case the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee, for approval. This charter sets out the purpose, authority and responsibility of the Council's internal audit function, and it has been updated to reflect the revised committee structure, and there's also reference in there to the external quality assessment in more detail, and that's reflecting that the public sector standards require the council to have an external quality assessment at least once in every 5 years, and the last assessment being 2017-18 would mean that the next one is scheduled for 22-23. So this is something that at this point we need to think ahead to prepare for. Apart from that, no significant changes, and the charter reflects the requirements of the public sector standards. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Any questions? No, I don't think so. So this is the updated internal audit charter, and you say we do this every 5 years?
Sorry, so the external quality assessment needs to be conducted once in every 5 years. So this is an external person or body reviewing the internal audit function conformance against the standards. So that's the bit that needs to be done every 5 years. But the presentation of an audit charter needs to be more regular, and this is with you to reflect the update.
We're asked to... We have no questions. We're asked to approve the updated internal audit charter. Members, can I take it that you approve? Thank you very much. The report has been approved, and we will now proceed with agenda item 11, outcome of the Housing Benefit Subsidy 2019-2020 certification work, which is on page 84 to 105. And this is presented by Trevor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the large areas of expenditure that the authority has is to make housing benefit payments to people entitled to have support in with their rents, and essentially the amounts paid out are done in accordance with rules and regulations set by the DWP, and in terms of the money expended or allocated to people in terms of the benefit, we actually get that reimbursed in the terms of subsidy. And you'll see on page 85 the amount of money we're talking about, just under £28.5 million. So it's key that an audit of the processes we go through and the way that we account for them is undertaken. It's now part of our responsibility to engage a third party to look at that. It makes absolute sense that BDO are our external auditors for our main auditing purposes. They actually have to undertake some assessment anyway of housing benefits, being such large figures, which will impact on our accounts, and therefore BDO were engaged and have been since the start of their contract with us to undertake this work. So this report just goes through the processes that they've had to go through in terms of how it's laid down by DWP. So there's quite a few pages in terms of the report that they are obliged to send through on their findings to DWP, and that's in Appendix 1 on page 87 going forward. But for members, the main thing to take out for this is it is a very complicated and complex area. There are many, many rules and regulations. So the fact that the report is qualified is not unusual for us over a period of time, for years, and indeed with other authorities. But you'll see on page 85 in that reference I made to the total value, the net impact of the review was that it's increased our claim, subsidy amount by £77, and that's there's lots of to and fro-ins in the appendices, but that's a net position. So in terms of how we drew up the accounts and that, then that's all perfectly good. The DWP in receiving a note that is qualified asks us to give confirmation that or assurance that we are putting processes in place to try and minimise those going forward, and make a note there on the 10th of June the Revenues and Benefits Manager did send a letter outlining that we do undertake accuracy checking in place, and additional staff training has been put in place to try as much as we're able, but given the complexity of it and that, we're able to do that. So in terms of, it's an additional fee that we've agreed with BDO. Initially came in at £12,500 for the 1920 certification work. If they find an error, then they are obliged to do further work, and that, so there was an increase in the fee because of that additional work, and that was agreed with officers. This is, as I say, just for you members to note that the process we've been through in terms of getting our £28.5 million pounds back from central government, and it's properly been accounted for. So the members are asked to receive and note the certification letter and report on our subsidy claim, and the report that was produced by our external auditors, BDO. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trevor. I thought that, perhaps I got this wrong, that most housing benefit was going over, or going to be part of universal credit. Therefore, we would be doing much less of this. Only for retired people?
We are doing less. When somebody's been on housing benefit and they then have changes in circumstances, it will often lead to them having to transfer over to universal credit. So it's a gradual process, and it's going to happen over a number of years. So we are seeing a decline, but so it will take a while.
Thank you very much. An awful lot of work for £77, but it's public money, as they say. Any questions, members? No? As there are no questions, we're asked to note the certification letter and the report on the Council's housing benefit subsidy claim for 2019-20 that was sent to the Department of Works and Pensions by our external auditors, BDO. Members, can I take it that this report is noted? Thank you very much. Thank you, members. The report has been noted, and we will now proceed with agenda item 12, detail of the latest review and update of the Council's Strategic Risk Register, which we all were involved with, or most of us. This is on page 105 to 134. Can I once again invite Trevor Wilson, Head of Finance, to set out the report?
Thanks, Chair. And as you rightly say, this was a product of a members' development evening that the review of the strategic risks of the authority was considered by members back in May. The purpose of bringing it to this committee is to assure members that reviews do take place, and the consequential report goes through to Cabinet, and the details that they received a week or so back were approved. As I say, the majority of members were at that session, and this is the resultant risk register. As was picked up earlier, we do have other risk registers. We do have operational risks, and as was mentioned about where we have major projects, then there are specific risk registers for those. But this is just looking at the overall strategic risks of the authority, things that would potentially stop us achieving your corporate objectives over the period. So members are asked to hopefully be satisfied that due process has been followed, and that we do take regular reviews of the strategic risks. So members are asked to note and endorse the strategic risk register and action plans for managing the high-rated risks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trevor. You took the words right out of my mouth. Any questions for Trevor? Councillor Mann.
Just to remark, Chair, that I think Cabinet last week when I was an observer, it was noted how successful this process has been in updating the strategic risk register, and I think Cabinet are inclined that this process should continue, and so we'll find ourselves doing this again in 12 months' time, I'd imagine.
I think that's right, and it's, well, if nothing else, it's a way of getting everyone engaged and involved, and not, it's sort of high-level stuff, but good. Thank you, Councillor Mann. Any other questions? Councillor White.
It's just a brief question. There was an item that came up on the last full council that was a private session that discussed an item that should be considered for the risk register. Will that be in a future risk register, or has that conversation gone further?
That will be picked up by management board, and that will be reflected in the risk register, so we do keep a review of it. So there's two essential reviews that go on. Once is by members, as we've done, and once is by corporate management team. But during the intervening period, then if there's something that has been raised for consideration, then that will be picked up, and that. So I would expect management board to be looking at that following the council meeting. Yeah.
So we're asked to note and endorse the strategic risk register and the action plans for managing the high-rated risks. Members, can I take it that this report has been noted and endorsed? Thank you very much. The report has been noted and endorsed, and we will now proceed with agenda item 13, Treasury Management Annual Report. On page 135, and this is Phil Myers.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this is the annual report on Treasury management activities for the last financial year. Purpose is obviously for this committee to have a first look at that report before it is taken on to full council. So I'll be sort of brief because it's quite a detailed report, but I'll just pick out some of the highlights. In terms of the external context, well, I think we're all aware of the last year being a particularly unusual year, and that's had its impact in terms of the sort of environment in which our treasury management activities have operated over the last financial year. Interest rates at ultra low rates. We saw some large movements in financial markets, stock values at the start of the year, but then with the good news in terms of vaccines and the rollout programs, that triggered a significant recovery towards the latter part of the year, and so we saw asset prices increasing quite significantly. We've seen some ups and downs in gilt yields, which are important in terms of the cost of borrowing to local authorities. So yields fell and then later reversed and started to creep higher, albeit still at levels that are regarded as historically low. And in terms of the sort of credit backdrop, in terms of credit risk measures suggested improving credit conditions. However, it was felt still prudent to maintain quite a tight policy in terms of maximum duration of our investments, which was retained at 35 days on the recommendation of Arlene Close, our Treasury Management Advisors. In terms of at a local level, page 140 of the report has got a couple of tables on there that really encapsulates the council's treasury management position. And the key points to note from those tables is there's been an increase in our borrowing requirement, and that's measured through an indicator called the capital financing requirement. So it's 21.837 million at the 31st of March, which is an increase of over £11 million from the previous year, and that's really mainly as a result of the significant increase we've got in our capital programme with projects such as Horizon 120, the infrastructure. But we also made a payment to improve some facilities where our recycling material is processed, and we will recoup that money over the period of the contract for that arrangement. So our borrowing requirement has increased, and that's a result of our capital programme largely. But we haven't actually increased our external borrowing, so we've actually internalised that increase, and what that actually means is we've used our own cash resources that we're holding for other purposes, something that's referred to as internal borrowing. So as a consequence of that, the amount of cash we have available for alternative investments has reduced. In terms of borrowing, as I said, we've retained our current debt, which was £6 million, which is tied up in two what are called lender option borrower option loans, and they've been going for some years now, and we keep under review any opportunity to refinance those, because they do attract an interest rate which is would be seen as sort of relatively high in current day terms. I've also included in the report just a bit of commentary about some changes in terms of Public Works Loan Board lending arrangements, which new guidance on lending to local authorities have been introduced, and this is following the sort of some concerns at central government about local authorities borrowing for what they called borrowing for yield, or investments, and buying investments primarily for yield. So the Public Works Loan Board has now brought in new rules or new guidelines for lending, which says that authorities that undertake that type of activity within their capital programme would actually be precluded from borrowing from the board if that was the case. There is a positive aspect of the change in that the changes were introduced with a reduction in the cost of borrowing, so the margin that the PWB charges on top of gilt yields was reduced from 1.8% to 0.8%. So what it does mean is authorities that do borrow from the board will get that borrowing at a much cheaper rate. In terms of Treasury investments, I think that's set out on the page 142. So there's a table setting out where we started the year, what investments were made, and what investments matured, and the balance at the end of the financial year. And I think that there's a stark increase in the line for the Debt Management Office, where there was a huge amount of investments being made and also being sold. And that was primarily because of the funding that government was providing to local authorities to passport through to businesses and other individuals to support through the COVID pandemic. How we've managed that funding has been through a series of short-dated deposits with the Debt Management Office, which is essentially UK government. And the primary reason for that really being that security of those funds was paramount, because we were only effectively holding a lot of that money temporarily until we dispersed it to those that were eligible under the various grant schemes that were in operation. So that did increase the volume of activity going through the Debt Management Office. Apart from that, much of our sort of day-to-day cash flow was managed through movements with our money market funds. But it'd be fair to say that on all of those investments, we were getting very little by way of return due to the sharp fall in interest rates. We didn't make any changes to our pooled funds, so we still retain the 19 million spread across a variety of equity and diversified funds and property funds. And has been mentioned, the value of those funds were helped by the increases in the stock prices that we saw towards the end of the year, so that a lot of the downturn in their values that we had at the 31st of March 2020 was reversed, and we ended the year with a net unrealised gain on those funds of just £1.22 million. The property fund, the CCLA property fund, that suspended dealing during last year, again in response to the COVID pandemic and the uncertainty around pricing property assets. But that suspension was lifted in September, so if we wish to deal, we are able to. They did actually, as part of that lifting the suspension, they did introduce a notice period of 90 calendar days if you do want to deal out of the fund. In terms of the returns on the pooled funds, At the start of the year, we were anticipating a reduction in the dividend income of somewhere in the order of 25 to 30%. As it turned out, it wasn't quite as stark as that, and we still actually made a return on the pooled funds in excess of 4%, which bolstered our overall returns, given the drop in the short-term in investment interest. But we were nevertheless still short of budget by £198,000 for the year. We do expect that reduction to continue, so the medium-term financial strategy does provide for a continuation of reduced income from our investments, although there is recovery anticipated as we move out through the years of the MTFS. The report also picks up on the sort of compliance side of Treasury management, so there's a number of indicators which we set and measure ourselves against, and I think that the report just generally confirms that those indicators have been complied with or met. There was just a one day in terms of our day-to-day banking balance where we did have monies held which was above the norm. That was due to circumstances that we were not able to control. It was the commercial banking system that Lloyds operated, which affected all their customers at the time, and it just meant that we weren't able to make a placement with the debt management office on that day, so we did hold a higher balance than we would normally want to hold, but that was corrected the following day. So I think those were the sort of main points that I thought just be worth covering, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil. Members, any questions for Phil? I just like to, well, two things I just wanted to say. Just more an observation. On page 142, in the investment position, I had to read that twice. The amount of money that we've had over a period of time in the debt management office, 844 million pounds. Is that right? Or is that a mistake?
No, that's accumulation of.
Yes, okay, but it's still a large amount of money, getting onto £1 billion. On the next page, right in front of it, pooled funds volatility. Now, two questions. The volatility at 20 for 9 months, and then it goes down to 11.8. Was that because we switched funds, or what has it been?
No, I think that's just a measure. So that's derived really from the price of the asset pricing of the funds. So I think that's just reflecting the fact that conditions did
that they were
stabilise a little bit.
volatile. Yeah. But when it says 20.
Yeah. So that's suggesting it was more volatile earlier in the year, and then it sort of got less volatile.
But then further down, just underneath that, it says 3.3% for similar local authorities, and all clients 4.4%. Is that imply that our funds, or the funds that we're invested in, are inherently more volatile? Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but is that basically what that's saying?
Yes, essentially, compared with the other authorities that Arlene Close have as clients, our portfolio is in a mix of funds that had a higher level of volatility. But with volatility comes also the opportunity to generate the returns. So you see that our returns, and particularly our total return, is significantly higher than the other authorities. And I think it's that approach that we said we would need with those funds, that we would need to go in for the medium to long term because of that volatility. But if we're happy to keep the money tied up in there, then in the long run the returns, particularly on the income side, which is what we're after, should be beneficial.
Is there any talk of increasing our investments from the 19 million to any thought of that?
It's something that's kept under review. And it's certainly a question that gets asked regularly. I think where we are in terms of Treasury, as we mentioned, we've got some sort of many aspects of our Treasury activities at the moment. We've got a much more progressive capital programme, and therefore the requirement for cash is very much much more significant.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I'm sorry. Did any other members wish to speak? No.
I was just going to say that I was obviously looking at the credit rating there, so obviously if it's more volatile, it's got a lower credit rating, and if it's got a higher credit rating, it's more stable. That was just an observation.
Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, we're asked to recommend submission of the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2020-21 to full Council. Members, can I take it that we recommend submission of this report? Yes? Thank you very much. So the recommendation has been approved, and we will move on to agenda item 14, Local Code of Corporate Governance and the Annual Governance Statement for 2020-21, which is set out on pages 147 to 174 of the agenda. Can I please invite once more Trevor Wilson, Head of Finance, to set out the report?
Thank you, Chair. Essentially, the report is looking at the annual governance statement for 2021. So an assessment of our governance arrangements that were in place during the last financial year. And this accompanies the statement of accounts when it's published later in the year. It's also a requirement that whilst it does essentially look at the last financial year, it does go up to the point of publication. So whilst we're seeking approval of it at this stage, there is a likelihood that there will be some changes to it, and I'll draw that to your attention as we go through. So one of the things that we look at in terms of our annual governance statement is to look initially to review our local code of corporate governance. This is something that you've been brought to you on an annual basis for the last few years. So the local code of governance was put on page 151 to 162. And basically this follows a document that was received some time ago from SIPFA and the Chief Exec's organisation, SOLAS, where they set up a framework for delivering good governance in local government. And basically it follows 7 principles, and as I say, this has come before you for the last few years since it was set up. There are some minor tweaks to it as we've gone through. It's set out looking at each of the principles, looks at the rationale of that principle, and then how we actually look to evidence and demonstrate that we are meeting those. So there's a few sort of adjustments to it, and that in terms of their corporate strategy, and the annual plan normally covers a 12-month period, but we've taken the decision, or members have taken the decision, that will be an 18 months. So there's subtle changes made in there in this document, but essentially the governance arrangements are as they have been and will progress in the same way in future. As you'd expect, there's a lot of governance around local authorities, and it's been well proven over the years. And that so when we look at the annual governance statement, the first thing that officers have done is to go through the local code of corporate governance and to make some changes to update that as appropriate. So that's the first element that's been done in doing that assessment. That's laid out in Appendix A. And then the actual annual governance statement works on the basis of that. It uses the setup of the 7 principles and lays those out. As I say, this is a document that gets published along with the statement of accounts, so we feel it's important to outline to, no doubt, the many readers of the statement of accounts as to how our governance arrangements are performed and that. But so those are reiterated in there. But I think the main area to draw your attention to is on page 168, which is the review of effectiveness of the governance framework, and how looking to say to the readers and our communities about how the governance arrangements have worked. Obviously, there's been issues this year with a number of things in terms of how we've had to react to the COVID situation. But in-year review mechanisms have pretty much carried on. That Cabinet has continued to look at, monitor and overhaul financial performance and performance in terms of service delivery. The Corporate Director, Section 151 officer, as you've received a robustness in terms of the budget process when the budget was set. The work of the Performance Management Board, how that has been in place and continued to perform during the year. And indeed, just highlighting the work programmes of the 2 development scrutiny committees, looking at community and partnerships. It identifies that there was a small number of complaints were raised under the Member Code of Conduct, and these have been reviewed in line with processes by the monitoring officer. Yourselves, in terms of the work that you undertake, looking through during the course of the year and reflecting on your meetings, and when you approved the minutes, obviously you were key in looking at the Constitution and that, so and in terms of the big review that was undertaken there, so this reflects on the work that was done there, and also the work that you did when you looked at the Local Government Association Draft Model Code of Conduct and responded to the consultation questions. And in terms of things that have happened tonight, we've looked at the Internal Audit Charter. We've had it there for a while. Angie has brought you an update of that and how we continue to work to that. In terms of the internal audit, also about working to the public sector internal audit standards, and making reference to, as you've already heard, that they were externally assessed in 17-18, and the good work that's been done in taking that forward and generally conforms. There is reference into the work that undertaken by the external auditor, BDO. So work will be undertaken in terms of preparing the accounts. And this was essentially looking back at assurance that everything had been done and signed off for the 1920 accounts. That position is still open at the moment, so when I said that there will be needed to be changes to this document, and that when that is reported through to you on the 1920 accounts, then if there's anything that comes out of that that needs to be reflected in here, then we'll be obliged to put that in there. So as I say, we will come back to you in terms of that in due course. The review of the strategic risk register to show that we do action in terms of keeping an eye on our risks. external inspections. Angie mentioned one earlier about an inspection we had from the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, but we've also had unannounced inspections by the Health and Safety Executive not during the year, but on the 20th of April in terms of how we were operating to the COVID restrictions and that, and making sure that we were compliant with those. In both that and the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency, and that we got a very clean bill of health from both of those organisations. We have our cyber security capabilities assessed by an external certificated company. And then in terms of our website accessibility, we've got a new company looking to assess that. Local government ombudsman, in terms of just reporting in terms of what happened there in terms of 2020, 2021. Obviously they were working under restricted arrangements and that, so in terms of the consideration and the time taken, then that was obviously expanded, but there was 10 matters raised with the Ombudsman. Of those, the Ombudsman has considered that no complaints were upheld against the Council, but there's 3 matters that we're still, or at the time of writing, we're awaiting decisions. So those are things that happened during the year. As at the end of the year, we send out an assurance statement asking our senior managers to say that they have undertaken all of their work within the various control framework that we have for the authority, and so we get those are returned, and any issues and that were identified, and part of the audit programme for next year will be to look through those and make sure they are being adhered to. And in terms of the year-end review, you've just tonight considered the report from Angie in terms of her annual report and in terms of general adequacy of the assurance of governance arrangements. And so that, along with the Council's local code of corporate governance review, forms the work that's undertaken to achieve the review. On page 171, we look at governance issues that were identified in the last annual governance statement, which needed to be addressed, and there's action being taken on those. Obviously, information governance and cyber security were quite a key area to look at, and in terms of the actions taken, there's been the audits undertaken by the audit team, but in more recently, Microsoft licensing, that has been upgraded to provide more security in terms of protecting the access to devices, particularly as we're working more from home, and that, so there's been some developments there. And that's not just a standstill position, but obviously that will still be a major sort of area that we'll continue to look at. In terms of the other item that was about, as we've discussed tonight several times, about the sheer size of the capital programme and the large projects, there was recognition that we needed to make sure there was strong and effective governance, and a key development in that has been the new constitution that you considered and full council have approved, and it will then be making sure that that is embedded as we go forward. So overall, in terms of the assurance statement, that despite the coronavirus, the annual governance statement, I suggest to you, demonstrates that the council's governance arrangements have remained fit for purpose, even when flexed by invoking emergency powers and holding committees virtually. There have been no significant detriment to the council's ability to deliver its services. In terms of governance issues and areas of significant change, then page 172 and then over to 173, just outline some areas that we need to obviously pay attention to. So the pandemic and the impact that that's going to have in 21-22, obviously as we move out of, hopefully, and get back to some normality, then there'll be improvements in that. And we've already had some movement in terms of virtual meetings, and that ceased on the 7th of May, and we're now, obviously, as evidenced tonight, back in person for meetings. So identifying, as I said, about IT systems and staff, and with most office-based staff continuing to work remotely, so we need to make sure that careful management as lockdown continues to ease during 21-22. An important area, there's obviously been a lot of money passed through the authority, and that continues into the current year, so there will be some post-assurance work to be done on the business grants that have been provided during the last financial year and continue in this financial year, so that is an area identified in that last bullet point at the top of page 173. And then just identifying some other governance risks that we need to be mindful of, and we continue to highlight about the uncertainty in terms of the government's potential changes to funding and local government. For the last 2 years, it's been a rollover of the previous year's arrangements, and there's been no fundamental change. I think that probably will be the same for the next financial year, but the government is keen to get back to giving us more of a longer-term assessment of the financial support they give, and also to invoke changes in the way that we are funded. Reference to the climate emergency in terms of the work that's obviously going on there, and that the council is doing, and with its ambition to be carbon neutral by 2030. Financial management code, a review. There was new management code come in 2021, so there's some work to be done in terms of that. And just identifying, the Chair made mention earlier in terms of the support that community and people have had during the pandemic, and that one of which is additional monies granted through universal credit. That's due to cease, and that the additional £20 on that. So it'll be interesting to see how that will be managed, and what the implications will be on our collection rates for council tax, particularly going forward. Hopefully it won't be a major issue on the collections, but I just think it's worth noting at this stage that that's obviously going to have an impact on some of our communities. So in conclusion, and this is essentially for you to hopefully agree to that that the information provided on here is correct, and that you would be happy to endorse this, and ultimately it's the responsibility of the Chief Exec and the Leader of the Council to sign off the documentation. So once this has been through yourselves, and that it will go to Andy Wright and Graham Butland to sign off, but with the caveat that, as I say, there will be a need to make changes once we know the outcome of the 1920 accounts audit. So in terms of recommendations, on page 147 there were three. So first of all is to approve the updated local code of corporate governance. Secondly, to approve the annual governance statement as set out, and then to thirdly, to give delegated authority to the corporate finance director to make initial changes to the annual governance statement prior to its submission with the statement of accounts. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Colleagues? Members, something just caught my eye here, Trevor. On page 155, right at the top, it says the council has a people's panel. No, I've been here 6 years and I've never heard of it. You've never heard of it? So, I wonder if somebody could find out.
It is people.
Or
It's
I
people
think-
who volunteer. It's residents who volunteer to scrutinise council work, and it's been going on lots of years. One of my constituents on it. I get regular reports.
I just query why it's got such a low profile if it's something in the community.
Well, certainly appeals do go out from time to time, asking people to become involved and volunteer, but it obviously doesn't have a great appeal to the man or lady in the street.
Okay, well, it does exist, and it's not a typo then, all right. I think it's, excellent. We've had very few complaints or members' issues, so long may it continue. Thank you very much, Trevor. If there are no other questions, I'll just have to repeat again, go through it formally. But can I also ask, because the third question here is to give delegated authority to make amendments. Can we be sure that we actually see the final document? Okay, because we're approving these two documents, but if they're going to be changed, okay, I'll leave that with.
Yes, Chairman, that's absolutely fine. If there's any amendments, we'll make sure they're circulated back around the committee.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, it just makes me think, and apologies that I did draft this report and that, but whether in fact, that it should be in consultation with yourself and that, whether you want that added.
Yeah. I wasn't quite going that far, but
That will suffice, Chair.
but I will.
Don't need to circulate us, just do it for the Chair.
All right. So on that basis, the committee is recommended, I'll repeat it again. First of all, to approve the updated local code of corporate governance as detailed in Appendix A, and B, approve the 2021 annual governance statement as set out in Appendix B prior to it being signed by the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council, and C, give delegated authority to the Corporate Director of Finance to make any required amendments to the annual government statement prior to its submission with the Statement of Accounts. Can I please have a proposal?
Chairman, are you looking to include the amendment that's done in consultation with yourselves?
Yes, please.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to be clear before members voted on that delegation.
Right, so
if we can amend that delegation to say, give delegated authority to the Corporate Director of Finance to make any required amendments in consultation with the Chairman of the Corporate Governance Committee.
Could I have a proposer to move the recommendations? Councillor Walters, excuse me. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson, thank you. The recommendations have been moved and seconded. I'll now put this to a vote. All in favour, please indicate. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. The recommendations have been approved. So, members, this item concludes our business for the afternoon. For the evening, I will therefore close the meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee at 9:47. Thank you,
Chairman, may I interrupt you just for a moment and say how wonderful this report has been, and I'm very grateful. And Trevor, this is going to be probably your last one, isn't it?
I was in 2 minds whether to say this is the last report on the agenda and my last report, but yes, it is your last.
Yes, we're heading for retirement. Wow, congratulations. Great report. Well, wonderful way to go out.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. That was very timely and I should have thought of it myself. Not at all.
I'm not sure how widely it was known, but obviously a strange circumstances.
It was in the House to Gazette today. So.
So thank you, members, for your attendance. It's 9:47.
Lovely. Chairman, if I can just get confirmation